My parents left me with my grandma, then sold everything and moved abroad. Years later, they suddenly came back wanting to reconnect, but soon revealed that they wanted something from me. This might sound a bit bizarre, but please bear with me. My parents never really wanted children. They were focused on living their lives without the responsibility of raising a kid, and my dad especially was adamant about not having any. My mom shared his feelings for years until she started seeing all her friends and her sister becoming mothers. She felt a sense of missing out and began talking to others, deciding she wanted at least one child so she wouldn't regret it in the future. However, my father remained completely against the idea. He didn't believe in having a child just to avoid future regrets. He was confident in his decision and saw no reason to change his mind, no matter how much pressure my mother was putting on him. This disagreement led to a lot of tension in their relationship. They argued constantly. My mother is feeling torn between her own uncertainty and the expectations placed on her by her family. My father, on the other hand, felt like he was being backed into a corner over something he never wanted in the first place. After weeks of fighting, my father eventually gave in, not because he suddenly wanted a child, but because he was exhausted by the constant conflict. He agreed not out of excitement or love for the idea, but simply to keep the peace. And that is how I came into this world. The moment my mother actually had me, she realized something she hadn't expected. She didn't enjoy being a mother. In fact, she hated it. She hated waking up in the middle of the night to feed me or change my diapers every few hours. The reality of taking care of a baby was overwhelming for her, and she quickly discovered that she had neither the patience nor the desire to do it. My dad absolutely did not help in raising me, so my mom would frequently try to leave me with my grandmother or my aunt for extended periods, sometimes even for days at a time, so that they could take care of me. It wasn't just that she didn't know how to care for me, she didn't even want to learn. To her, motherhood was more of a burden than anything else. Because of this, I grew up feeling a much stronger bond with my aunt and grandmother than I ever did with my own mother. They were the ones who truly took care of me, and in many ways they felt more like my real parents. My aunt already had 2 sons of her own, but that didn't stop her from making room in her heart for me. She had always wanted a daughter, and I think that's part of the reason she showed me so much love and attention. She took on responsibilities that weren't hers simply because she cared about me. My grandmother, too, stepped in to fill the void my parents left. She saw firsthand how neglected I was, and she never hesitated to take care of me. She became the one I depended on the most, making sure all my basic needs were met. Because of how involved she was in raising me, I grew up thinking that this was just how things were supposed to be. To me, it felt normal that my grandmother and aunt were my primary caretakers, while my actual parents remained distant. Meanwhile, my parents would go off traveling for weeks and months, leaving me behind to be taken care of by my mom's family like it was nothing. At first, I missed them terribly. I longed for their attention and hoped that maybe one day they would realize how much I wanted to be with them. Sometimes I would write them letters pouring out my feelings, hoping that if they read my words, they would start to miss me too. But it never worked. They never wrote back. And even when they finally returned home from their trips, they wouldn't rush to see me. Days would go by, and they would make no effort to come visit. It wasn't until my grandmother would finally scold them, calling them out for being such neglectful parents, that my mother would reluctantly come to see me. And when she did, she would bring a few gifts as if that was supposed to make up for everything. I would always get excited to see her, but I could see it in her face. She never looked happy around me. It was like being with me was a chore she had to get through before she could go back to her normal life. My dad, on the other hand, didn't even bother pretending. He never came to see me at all. If I ever tried to talk to him on the phone, he would always have an excuse. At first, I believed him. I thought maybe he was just busy. Maybe he really did want to talk but couldn't at that moment. But as time went on, I realized the truth. He just didn't care. Eventually, I got tired of hoping and stopped trying altogether with my parents. For 10 years, I lived this way, being raised by my grandmother while my parents lived their lives without me. But then, everything changed. My grandmother was diagnosed with cancer. And out of nowhere, the one person who had always been there for me was suddenly too sick to take care of me. She needed treatment. And with her health declining, she could no longer look after me the way she always had. That's when my aunt stepped in. She confronted my parents and demanded that they finally take responsibility for me. My grandmother had done their job for a decade, and now it was their turn. But as expected, my father flat out refused. He wanted nothing to do with me and wasn't interested in changing that. My mother, instead of stepping up, tried to push the responsibility onto my aunt, making excuses about why she couldn't take me in. This led to a massive fight in the family. My aunt was furious. She had been patient for years, but now she was done tolerating their selfishness. Finally, she made a threat that forced them to act. She told them that if they didn't take me in, she would call Child Protective Services and have them reported. She made it clear that she wasn't bluffing, and my parents knew it. Faced with the possibility of legal trouble, they had no choice but to take me back. I absolutely hated living with my parents. I don't think I've ever seen two people more miserable than them. It was painfully obvious that they resented having me around. But what hurt the most was that I couldn't understand why. I wasn't a bad kid. I never caused trouble, never acted out, and always tried my best to be the kind of child any parent would be proud of. But no matter what I did, they still treated me like an unwanted burden. My grandmother had raised me to be independent from a very young age. She knew she wouldn't always be there to take care of me, so she made sure I could take care of myself. Because of that, I never cried for attention, never demanded anything from my parents, and never made a fuss. I handled things on my own. I was always quiet and kept to myself. And at school, I excelled. My teachers had nothing but good things to say about me. I was a star student, always respectful, always hardworking. At home, I went out of my way to be helpful. I would wash the dishes with my mom, help my dad with the lawn, and do little chores around the house just to prove that I wasn't some helpless child they had to take care of. I wanted to show them that I could pull my own weight, that I wasn't an inconvenience. But even after all of that, nothing changed. My parents still acted like I was nothing more than an unwanted guest in their home. My dad refused to pay for any extracurricular activities no matter how much I wanted to join. It didn't matter if it was something educational or beneficial for me. He just didn't want to spend any extra money on me. My mom, on the other hand, barely acknowledged my existence. She didn't even care if I made it home safely from school each day. While other parents worried about their kids checked in on them, or at least asked how their day was, my mom simply didn't bother. Most of the time, my parents weren't even home. They would constantly take off on another trip, leaving me behind like they always had. But now, instead of leaving me with my grandmother or aunt, they would just stock the fridge with groceries and expect me to manage on my own. I was still just a kid, yet they had no problem abandoning me for days at a time. I remember how painfully lonely it was living with them. The house was always quiet, always empty, and I felt like I was completely invisible. I missed my grandmother more than anything. Even though she was fighting her own battle with cancer, she still called me regularly just to check in and make sure I was okay. She was the only one who made me feel like I still mattered. My aunt, too, did what she could. Sometimes she would come over with home-cooked meals and sit with me for a little while, making sure I was eating properly and wasn't completely alone. She knew my parents weren't taking care of me, and even though she couldn't force them to be better, she did what she could to fill the gaps. By the time I was 15, I had already come to terms with the fact that there was no real relationship between me and my parents. We weren't close, we weren't connected, we were just three people who happened to live under the same roof. There was no warmth, no love, no bond between us. They existed and I existed, but that was it. Around this time, my dad started drinking more and more, and it wasn't long before it became a real problem. He would come home drunk regularly, stumbling through the door late at night, reeking alcohol. He had also picked up gambling, which only made things worse. It was like he was looking for anything to escape his life, and his addictions only fueled the constant fights between him and my mom. Their arguments were unbearable. They would scream at each other for hours, their voices echoing through the house. And somehow, every single fight would lead back to me. My dad, drunk and bitter, would blame me for everything wrong in his life. He would shout about how my birth had ruined his life, how I had destroyed his relationship with my mother, and how he could have been childless and happy if it weren't for me. My mother, in turn, would yell back at him, saying that she was tired of him throwing her mistake in her face, that she had already apologized to him over and over again for getting pregnant with me. I would just sit and silently cry in my room, listening to them screaming. Then on my 16th birthday, my parents dropped a bombshell on me. They sat me down to inform me that they had decided to sell everything and move out of the country. They claimed they could no longer be happy here, that their marriage was falling apart, and that I was the reason for it. My dad had apparently decided he wanted to become a tour guide in Thailand, and my mom, of course, couldn't imagine living without him, so she was going with him. So they weren't just leaving the house, they were leaving me too. They told me they would talk to Grandma about me moving back in with her permanently like I was just another thing to hand off before they left. By this time, Grandma had sort of recovered after years of battling cancer and was doing much better. My parents assured me they would leave some money with her for my care, as if that would make up for completely abandoning me. I was really upset to hear all this. I mean, I didn't mind living with my grandma, but I was getting sick of my parents tossing me around like I was nothing. They had never considered what was best for me, only what was most convenient for them, and I was sick of it. I pointed out how selfish they were being. Grandma had only just recovered from cancer, and instead of letting her enjoy her health, they were dumping their responsibilities on her again. She had already raised me once, and now they expected her to do it all over again while they ran off to live their dream lives. But my parents didn't care. My dad instead argued that I was a big girl now, so living with Grandma was going to be a good thing, as I could even take care of her. This is how I came to live with Grandma again. My grandma and my aunt had plenty to say to them before they left. But my parents, being the shameless people they were, didn't care at all. No guilt, no second thoughts, just relief that they were finally free of me. For the next 2 years, I lived with my grandma again. And honestly, I was fine. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a real home. My grandma took care of me like she always had, and my aunt and cousins were always there to support me. Life felt normal even if my parents were nowhere in the picture. Now I'm finally in college. I have my own dorm, and I'm a scholarship student, so I work hard to keep my grades up. I still visit my grandma whenever I can, and my aunt and cousins never fail to check, and they call me every weekend, making sure I'm doing okay. Even though my parents failed me, I still have family who cares. Throughout all this, my parents haven't talked to me or even reached out to ask how I was doing. Even back when I graduated high school, my grandma tried to get in touch with them, hoping they would at least acknowledge such an important moment in my life. But my parents never bothered showing up. Sometimes I would stalk my mom's Facebook account just out of curiosity, and she always looked really happy with my dad in the pictures. They still traveled and did their own thing and acted like they were a child-free couple. Just last week, out of nowhere, I got a call from my mom. I stared at my phone for a moment, surprised. She had never called me before, not when I was struggling, not when I needed her, not even when I graduated. And now, after all these years, she suddenly wanted to talk. When I picked up, her voice was casual, like nothing had ever happened. She told me that she and my dad were back in town and that they both wanted to see me. I asked her why, and that simple question seemed to offend her. She immediately got defensive, snapping, "What do you mean why? We are your parents. Can't we even see you?" I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. My parents. She and Dad had never acted like my parents. Not once. And now, all of a sudden, she wanted to pretend like we had some kind of bond. I pointed that out to her that for most of my life, she and Dad wanted nothing to do with me, so there was no reason for us to meet up now. She brushed my words aside and insisted that they needed to see me. She said that after all these years, she and my dad had come to realize the importance of having a child, and that they wanted to get to know me, that they were finally ready to be my parents. And that's when I couldn't help but laugh. Finally ready to be parents. Now I told her straight up that I had no interest in being their child anymore. That ship had sailed. If they had ever wanted to be parents, they should have stepped up when I was born, not now. After I had already learned how to live without them, I told her they could continue living their happy lives and enjoy their alone time forever. She tried to argue, but I was angry that she had the nerve to try and come back after all these years and act like I owed her something. So I just cut the call. Since then, Mom has sent me several voice messages asking, no begging me to call her back. She wants me to at least hear her out and thinks I am being unreasonable and unnecessarily mean to her. Aita update 1. I talked to my grandma and told her that my mom had reached out to me. She was just as surprised as I was. She didn't even know that my parents were back in town. After reading all of your comments, I'm finally starting to realize something. My parents, who have never called me, never checked up on me, and never cared about me before, must want something from me now. There's no other reason for them to reach out after all these years. There's no way this is out of love or regret. The problem is, I have no idea what they want. And honestly, I don't even want to find out. The only way to know would be to talk to them, and I have no interest in doing that. I can't stand the thought of seeing their faces after everything they put me through. Anyway, I'll update again when I can. Update 2. Guys, you won't believe what I just found out. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and I finally know the real reason why my parents suddenly wanted to reconnect with me. For the past 2 weeks, my mom has been non-stop calling, texting, leaving voice messages at all hours of the day. She just would not let up about wanting to see me. And the biggest shock, my deadbeat dad, the same man who has never cared to have a real conversation with me, actually reached out too. He messaged me, demanding to know why I was ignoring my mother's attempts to reconnect. He even had the audacity to call me rude for refusing to see them. That made me furious. They abandoned me. They treated me like I was nothing. And now suddenly I'm the bad guy. I knew then that something wasn't right, so I reached out to my aunt and my grandma, and I told them we needed to confront my parents together. Both of them agreed. None of us believed for a second that my parents were reaching out just because they missed me. We all knew how they had treated me over the years, and there was no way they suddenly had a change of heart. It was time to confront them and find out exactly what they wanted. So today, I finally met with my parents. I invited them to a cafe near my college, and my grandma and aunt came with me. I knew my parents were expecting me to show up alone, so when they walked in and saw I had backup, they looked completely caught off guard. It had been years since I last saw them, and honestly, I almost didn't recognize them. They both looked so much older than I remembered. My dad especially, he was thin, pale, and just sickly. It was obvious something was wrong. My parents tried to awkwardly greet me, but I wasn't there to play catch-up or exchange pleasantries. I got straight to the point. "What do you want from me?" I asked. At first, they tried to dance around the question, saying that they had genuinely missed me and wanted to see how I was doing, but I wasn't letting them off the hook that easily. I kept pressing, and after a lot of back and forth, my dad finally admitted he has kidney failure and needs a transplant. He explained how he'd been getting treatment in Thailand for a while. But now, because his condition was getting worse, he needed the best possible care, so that's why they had moved back to the area. He was telling me all this, his voice almost sounding like he wanted sympathy, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for him. Then my mom jumped in, saying that all their retirement funds had been drained because of his medical bills. She claimed they barely had enough money to survive. I didn't know whether to believe her or not. Part of me wondered if this was just another way to manipulate me. But then she said something that really hit me. She said she wanted me to move back in with them, get a part-time job, and help pay for my dad's treatment. That wasn't even the worst part. The real bombshell came next. She asked me to get tested to see if I was a potential match for donating a kidney to my dad. That's why they reached out. Not because they missed me, not because they cared, but because they needed something from me. Hearing this, I saw red. After everything they'd put me through, after years of neglect, they were asking me to give up a part of myself literally for him. It felt like a slap in the face, and I couldn't believe she had the nerve to ask. The sheer audacity of my parents to come to me after all these years, after treating me like I was nothing, and expect me to save them. I was so furious. I couldn't even find the words to respond. But before I could say anything, my aunt and grandma pounced on them. My grandma's voice shook with anger as she yelled, "How dare you! You and Cal never raised this child, never loved this child, never even spent time with her. She is 19 years old now, and you don't know a single thing about her. You abandoned her, left her with me, ignored all my calls, never once asked how she was doing, and now you want her to take care of you." My aunt nodded in agreement, her face full of disgust. "You two are unbelievable. You never even wanted her. You made her feel like a burden her whole life, and now when you need something, you suddenly remember she exists. How shameless can you two be?" At this, my mom actually had the nerve to argue. Her expression twisted in frustration as she spat out, "Yes, I always regretted having her, but now at least her life can finally be put to use. Helping her father is a good thing. Isn't that why people have children? She needs to help us during this time. If we can't ask our own daughter for a kidney, then who else are we supposed to ask?" It was like everything she was saying was meant to guilt-trip me into doing what she wanted. The way she spoke about me like I was just some tool she could use when it was convenient made my stomach churn. My mom was acting like I was obligated to sacrifice for them now, regardless of everything they'd put me through. She was so wrapped up in her own desperation that she couldn't even see how wrong it was for her to ask me for something like that, after all these years of abandonment. Until then, I had kept my mouth shut and tried not to get upset. But hearing their confession, I felt physically sick. I looked my parents straight in the eye and told them I was not going to help them. I told my mother outright that just because she gave birth to me didn't mean she owned me or my body. I reminded her that she and my father had spent their whole lives happily without me. So now, whether they lived or died, it had nothing to do with me. My dad immediately jumped in trying to argue. He said he had no siblings, that both his parents had cut contact with him and were now too old to even help, and that he had no one else to turn to. He kept insisting that I was his only chance of survival. Then, in the most pathetic display I had ever seen, he scrunched up his face like he was about to cry, fake cry, and pleaded with me to just forget the past and help him just this once so he could keep living. And then came the part that made my blood boil. He actually promised that he would finally be my father if I did this one thing for him. He said that if I refused, I would be letting him die, and that his death would haunt my conscience forever. Hearing this, my grandma yelled back at him for trying to emotionally manipulate me, for acting like a victim, and for trying to pin his mistakes on me. My aunt didn't hold back either. She straight up told them that they needed to stop begging, that my mind was made up, and that there was no way I was helping them. She also warned my parents that if they ever tried to contact me about this again, she would personally help me file a case against them and make sure they faced legal consequences. I nodded in agreement, standing my ground. My parents kept arguing desperately, trying to change my mind. My mom even started screaming at me, throwing out every insult and cuss word she could think of, furious that I was refusing to help them. But no matter what they said, my grandma and aunt stood their ground beside me, refusing to let them guilt or pressure me. Finally, we walked out. After that, I blocked both of my parents. I want nothing to do with them anymore. Tonight, I'm staying with my grandma because she and my aunt are really worried that my parents might try to show up at my campus and harass me again. Honestly, I'm still so shaken up. A part of me feels disgusted that they even had the audacity to ask me for something like this, after treating me like I was nothing my whole life. But at the same time, as much as I hate my dad, I don't want him to die. I hope he finds a way to survive this. But let me be very clear, I will not be helping them in any way. My parents are on their own. Update 3. It's been almost 7 months since my last update. I just found out this morning that my dad has passed away. My aunt called to let me know, and I could hear in her voice that she was surprised as well. She and my grandma are going to the funeral, but I've made up my mind not to go. I don't feel like it's something I need to be a part of. To be honest, I don't even know how to feel about this. The idea of calling him my dad feels off, because in reality, he was never really there for me. He wasn't a father in the way I've seen other people's dads be. He never spent time with me, never showed any care, never made an effort to be involved. So now he's gone, and it feels almost surreal. A man who for most of my life barely existed in any meaningful way is just gone. I don't feel a sense of loss because I never really had a relationship with him to begin with. I'm sure my mom is devastated. She's still blocked, so I can't hear her side of things, but I'm sure if she could get through to me, she'd be blaming me for his death. In her mind, I'm probably still the one to blame for everything. And honestly, I know none of this is my fault. But even so, the thought of facing her again after everything that's happened feels impossible. I don't know if I could ever look her in the eye after everything she